Okay, we are now recording. So, yeah, good morning, everyone. And thanks to everyone who's watching live. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to anyone catching up on the replay later, or watching it on YouTube or wherever you're watching the replay. So, I hope everybody's good, and I hope the sun's shining wherever you are. It's very, very hot here in Thailand. So, there's a few familiar faces. Most of, well, half of you who are my Akashic trainees, and others, clients that have done other things with me, done other trainings with me. And then there are some new faces, which is always exciting to have some new people. So hi to all the new people. And thanks for trusting me with, with this little journey. So as I just mentioned previously to recording, if you've got any questions, just type them into the Zoom chat box and I will get round to questions to answer the questions afterwards. I might answer the questions at the end. Let's see how much time there is. But anyway, you will receive the blueprint for this training anyway, so everything will be documented for you. So if you prefer to just listen and absorb the information, allow your subconscious to soak all the information up rather than distracting yourself by taking notes, because everything will be in the blueprint. So you don't have to get too stressed. And if you think, gosh, she's talking too fast. So you will receive the blueprint as well. So don't worry about that. However, you might want to make notes anyway, because there will for sure be, as I'm talking about some symptoms and some things that might arise for you, it might be something that's specific to either yourself, something that you've noticed about yourself, something that you might be feeling yourself, or something that you might have noticed about another. So again, half the people who are joining this are healers, and they've joined because they want to learn a little bit more. I do go into all this in my Akashic training, but this is a little kind of intro into it. So we're not going into any protocol stuff or any identifying stuff, but I will take you on a journey into your Akashic record to investigate and feel into your energy and scan your body and feel for any fragmentation or spiritual dissociation, which might become more relative to you once we get into the journey, and once I'm delivering the information about specific symptoms and kind of how fragmentation occurs, etc. So you might feel like actually that's quite relevant. So, if you do need to make notes at anything specific to you, then do that. You will also receive a transcribe of the meditation journey. So for those of you who are healers, then you can, of course, guide your group or guide your clients through a journey. But I'll talk about that at the end once we've finished, because of course there's always disclaimers towards this, because we have to be really careful that we're not re-traumatizing people. So the information is quite intense. It's a lot of information. The journey that we will do will be as gentle as possible. It's kind of a generic journey. I mean, it's powerful. So, don't underestimate what you may release, because you might not necessarily release fragmentation. You might actually release hooks, cords, implants, and things as well, because we kind of go into all of that. So just be aware of that as well. And of course, be aware of your own processes. If you have any deep traumas, if you have PTSD or CPTSD, if you are vulnerable to psychosis or dissociative identity disorder, ADD, anything like this that's related to trauma, then please be really gentle with yourself when we journey. I will, of course, guide you into a safe space, but just be aware that if you have any of this, and also as a healer, to be really aware when you're guiding people into these journeys, that you're not re-traumatizing people, because this is not what we want to do in a group setting, of course, because we're not individually working with someone in that super sacred one-to-one container. All right. So apart from that, just sit back, relax, and just enjoy the information and enjoy the journey. So I invite you to just take a moment to ground into your body and connect and drop into your breath. Allow your eyes to close for a moment just to drop into the space. Breathing in and out, either into and out of the heart or into and out of the solar plexus area. If you feel a little bit anxious or stressed already, solar plexus is where we tend to feel a little bit of dysregulation. So just allow yourself to drop into that space, slowing your breathing rate down to approximately 50% of its current rate. And I invite you to set an intention to disallow and block anything that is not relative to you and anything that is not in alignment with your soul path and purpose. Anything that may be intrusive to you. And that way it allows your organic protective mechanism to be activated, and that will occur. So if anything intrusive attempts to enter, it will be disallowed and blocked. And give yourself permission to only allow in what is relative to your soul path and purpose. And all and anything that is for your highest good and the highest divine order. And imagine a gold platinum sphere of protection around you. And around that sphere of protection is a ring of etheric fire on the external perimeter, or a mirror. And that external fire, you may set the intention for that external fire to neutralize anything negative or intrusive that attempts to enter your shield. Because ultimately, when we're talking about this kind of information, then of course, we can potentially alert the unseen forces. So it's always good to protect your fields. And if you wish, you can place the mirror around the etheric fire. That way you're giving yourself a double shield of protection and setting the intention that the mirror deflects and bounces off anything negative or intrusive. And that you, as a sovereign, free will, divine being, allow in only what you choose to allow in, and that is serving your highest path and purpose. So these are super clear intentions. And I invite you, if it feels safe for you, to give your subconscious and unconscious mind permission to release at that level anything that is buried deep in your psyche. And again, when we're communicating with the unconscious and the subconscious mind, we're literally giving that level of our consciousness that has buried anything deep. So anything that's hidden in the shadows or buried away or in another realm, dimension, anything that has split, separated, you're giving your other levels of consciousness permission to release. And ultimately, as I'm delivering this information to you, that may happen through the dots that may be connected for you as you're listening to this information. And if there are any other intentions that you wish to setting those intentions now before we dive into the information. Just making sure that you're on mute, so there's no distractions or noise. Okay, so I want to start by saying that what is happening in the world right now, and it's been happening for decades, has actually created the biggest global pandemic on this island. And that's not viruses, it is mental health. Depression, anxiety, fear, overwhelm. These are all symptoms that are caused by the systemic control and the micro traumas from all the societal, political, economic, and cultural conflicts that trigger people whose nervous systems are already dysregulated through their own traumas and growing up in dysfunctional households, difficult environments. And of course, when somebody's nervous system is already dysregulated, then the collective micro traumas from these specific situations that are happening on a daily basis can push people and trigger people into fear, worry, panic. And this in itself can cause people to shut down and dissociate. People can just completely disconnect. And what tends to happen is people can also lose their sovereignty and life essence because it's slowly sucked out of them by these systems. And the weaker people have, the less autonomy that an individual has, they tend to relinquish their energy, themselves, their mind, whatever, to this false savior, which is basically the governments and the systems that we believe that are here to, enforce and keep us safe. And these government sources actually alluring people into this false sense of security. And a lot of it is by design. I know those of you who follow me, I talk about this a lot on my trainings. I talk about this a lot on my social media, and I'll never stop talking about it because ultimately the more awareness that people have, then the more people can actually reclaim their autonomy and sovereignty. But ultimately, when people are relinquishing their autonomy and sovereignty unconsciously, it's not something that they're doing consciously, then this is literally capturing and ensnaring each individual's and thus the collective soul essence. It's literally ensnaring the life force energy, and ultimately it's done by design to keep people subservient. Again, I know that there's quite a few of you out there who are fully aware of this and know all this already, but there's also people who are not really aware of it. And there's going to be people who are watching the replay. This session's going to be on demand on my website after. So for sure, there's going to be different levels of people purchasing it. So I really want to stress that, these are things that are happening. And this particular tactic is used by military forces, and it is mental torture. And it's subtle mental torture done over years and years and years and years. And it starts in school. And this torture wears people down until they submit, and of course, ultimately into subservience. And this can result in people spiritually dissociating. it's not just about energetically and, that we're physically and energetically fragmenting, but people are spiritually dissociating, where people can lose faith in God, source, a benevolent higher power, and also disconnecting from their own ability to connect to God or source, or that even God is working through them. So ultimately, the people can disconnect from their own intuition, from their higher self, and ultimately becoming energetically fragmented, because when we do start to lose faith in this higher power, we are literally shutting off our essence. And again, this in itself can lead to being energetically fragmented and just feeling discombobulated. So ultimately, the knowledge that we have as healers, for those who are here because they want to help people, is having this understanding of this malfeasance that is ever present in the collective. As I said, that we can bring this information to our communities and be, sorry, I'm being attacked by my curtain. It's very windy here now. That ultimately, that they can help people to have a better understanding, because it's not necessarily a result of people's own traumas, because some people may not have had any significant trauma. That there are people out there who've been brought up in a really stable environments, and so they're not experiencing any energetic fragmentation as a result of traumas, but they can sure be experiencing it as a member of the collective. Because ultimately fragmentation occurs when we feel unsafe, when we feel threatened. And that can be, just the fear propaganda that is being bashed out daily on the news, that, terrorist attacks and all of these other things that, now they're talking about nuclear attacks and all of the conflicts that has been happening over the last year or two in the Middle East. And ultimately, the level at which an individual fragments is, of course, determined by the level of fear or terror that one is experiencing, either as a result of fear propaganda and being terrified by, being on high alert that there is a pandemic, a killer virus, or ultimately, as I mentioned already, terrorist attacks and things, but also the personal experiences that people have had, especially during childhood, through a sequence of events which we call adverse trauma or complex trauma, which results in CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress, or during a one-off event such as, a loss or an abandonment or a rejection or something, an accident, loss of a loved one, loss of a pet, etc. These are all things that can create what we call PTSD, shock trauma. So whether we're experiencing any level of trauma collectively or through the ancestral lines, whether it's personal or whether it's spiritual trauma, each of these impact individuals, leading to a sense of feeling unsafe in the body. And again, it's not always that we're aware of it. Sometimes for those of us who have already a dysregulated nervous system, which I believe is probably 85% of humanity, that have grown up in dysfunctional or difficult environments, and we've never been taught regulation. We've never experienced regulation. So this is a default in the body. From a trauma perspective, it's a default in the body, and we're used to it. So it's not something that we're always aware of. And ultimately, this feeling, this sense of unsafety, can split or amputate parts of our consciousness, piece by piece, little by little. Whether you want to call it soul fragmentation or the separation of consciousness, or shutting down or disconnection or dissociation. Again, depending, there's different levels of how we term something according to, whether we're coming from a shamanistic perspective, or we're coming from a trauma, physiology, psychotherapy perspective, or whether we're coming from a spiritual perspective. So there's different labels, but ultimately it's all the same: energetic fragmentation, soul fragmentation, amputation or splitting of consciousness, loss of, soul loss, And ultimately, this is all a protection strategy or a survival or coping mechanism where aspects of our consciousness have dissociated in order to survive. And this can also lead to a loss of spiritual or energetic autonomy, as I've previously mentioned, and a loss of sovereignty. And this is often occurring from, or this can result in an individual's intuition or discernment being shut off. One being completely disconnected from source, losing faith in, as I said, higher powers. And this can also result in people struggling with boundaries and self-discipline and ultimately determination, among other things. So is that making sense? Again, for sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but it's really interesting to, compact everything. But ultimately, as I mentioned, it's occurring during a traumatic event or a sequence of events, an experience, often in childhood. Because if we experience any level of abuse in our childhood, or we grow up in a volatile household where parents are toxic, in a toxic relationship, screaming, shouting, beating each other, drinking alcohol, etc., or the child themselves is threatened or abused, whether it's physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, gaslighting, or even, any kind of sexual abuse, then a child cannot defend itself. It can't run away, again, and depending on the age of the child. So ultimately, when a child cannot run away or rationalize or process a particular traumatic event, it literally goes into shutdown. The child, that part of the child that's been wounded, goes into a shutdown. And that aspect of their consciousness dissociates or fragments. It literally amputates itself to separate itself, himself, herself, or separate that part that's been deeply traumatized, so that either it's not experiencing, the child, that consciousness is not experiencing over and over again this particular incident, this experience, or that we're no longer attracting or living in the energy of that experience. And again, it can be a one-off event, or it can be a sequence of events growing up in an abusive, violent, dysfunctional environment. It can also occur, we can also experience trauma during birth that can also cause fragmentation, difficult traumatic births, being ill, premature births, getting stuck in the birth canal. These are all things that, again, we're not aware of, but can actually cause fragmentation, because especially if a child is, stuck in the birth canal, then that child will go into a threat, will feel threat for life, if that makes sense. And also being placed in an incubator, and feeling neglected or abandoned. It can also occur during religious ceremonies, any rituals where baptisms, for example, christenings, these can also be traumatic for children. And again, people don't actually realize that they're traumatizing their baby when they're christening or baptizing a baby. Dipping its head into water can be super traumatizing for a baby. But any through childhood, religious ceremonies, spiritual ceremonies, any ancestral or family ceremony, these are all things that can traumatize us as children. And again, we're not aware of it. And ultimately, any other kind of ritual where specific pieces of our essence have been stolen or captured. And this is really common in like dark religious environments. A lot of us are aware of the Vatican and what's going on. And we're also aware of, the dark side of religion, the dark side of spirituality, any kind of ritual or ritualistic abuse. These are often performed under trickery and coercion by false spiritual leaders, church leaders, who feed off our soul essence. They feed off our soul, our heart, or worse, feeding, they're feeding, or they may have an entity behind them that's feeding from them, and they're feeding, we are feeding their essence, and that's feeding the entity. So again, you know, this is things I talk about on the Akashic training, where we're working with these dark entities. But this is really common in religion. But ultimately, it can also result in that baby or that child that has experienced anything like that being stuck in this dissociative state, which is basically a functional freeze or fawn. And again, it's something that we're not aware of as we grow up. We don't know, we're not taught about this in school. I really think that trauma should be absolutely talked about in school, because it's fundamental. And if we did talk about trauma in school, we wouldn't be experiencing what we're experiencing now. But ultimately, this fragmentation and dissociation ultimately results in an individual being unable to heal from trauma due to these missing pieces. And also it can result in an individual being stuck in extreme denial and abdicating any responsibility, because they're literally stuck in a victim state. And again, most people are unaware of it. You know, people don't walk around thinking, oh, I'm in a victim state. It's just like, oh, why does this always happen to me? Every time I do this, this happens. You know, oh, they all come in threes, you know, that somebody waiting for us, or something else bad's going to happen because it always comes in threes. You know, these are just beliefs, and it's not like this. You know, so how to get yourself out of victim, if you recognize yourself, well, this always happens to me, or why does this always happen to me? You know, that's victim state. So if you do find yourself regurgitating that narrative, how you can bring yourself out of this victim state is just having an understanding that the world, the universe, is not targeting you, and just to have a greater understanding of, or change the narrative to, you know, the world is happening around me. It's happening in spite of me. It's happening through me. And it's happening with me, because ultimately you're a microcosm within the macrocosm. So it's not something that's happening to you deliberately. Of course, there are instances out there, we're not denying this, where people are targeted. But again, it's ultimately about bringing yourself out of the victim state, because you are the only one, no matter how much healing you have, if you are perpetuating that victim narrative, then nobody is going to be able to help you out of that, and no healer will ever be able to help you out of that. So it's changing that narrative and changing that belief. Every time you hear yourself repeating that, oh, this always happens to me, or they come in threes, you know, I'm just waiting for the next thing to happen because they all come in threes. Again, this is just a belief. It's not true. And if you reinforce that belief, then of course that's what's going to happen. We all know how our self-talk creates our reality. So ultimately, it's being aware of your self-talk, because your self-talk can also fragment your energetic matrix, and this can lead to, you know, self-esteem and low self-worth, and ultimately then you're manifesting more of the same. And as your energetic matrix is fragmented, then it can be difficult for you to manifest or create, because ultimately there's pieces of your blueprint are fractured and missing vital components. So it's really important to retrieve these fragmented parts, because when these pieces are missing, when these pieces are split off from our blueprint, then it also creates other symptoms, and we leave our biofields and our energetic shields vulnerable to more intrusive energies. And that can be, you know, negative entities, and I don't just mean entities as in negative beings or spirits, but just energy that's flying around in the cosmos. You know, there's so many portals and gateways being blasted open at the moment with things that are happening in our world. You know, people are consciously opening portals, like, for example, the Pope at Christmas opening portals. We've got CERN opening portals. You know, there's a lot of people out there opening portals, and they don't understand that they're inviting these energies in. And of course, the portals can invite positive energies, you know, benevolent energies, and they can also invite negative energies. And ultimately, when our biofields, when our shield is vulnerable, we've got holes and tears in the shield, then ultimately these can hop into our field. So this can leave us vulnerable to intrusions, and also feeling drained and disconnected, because we can also be leaking energy. You know, if we've got tears and leaks in our biofield, then we're not just vulnerable and susceptible to negative energies, picking up negative energies, and especially for empaths, but we're also leaking energy. And ultimately, this again can make it difficult to manifest or to attract the positive things that we want in our life. Is this all making sense? So yeah, just drop a thumbs up or a heart if you're feeling. And ultimately, when these pieces have fragmented, they can become stuck in other time vectors. Because ultimately, from a scientific perspective or a trauma, you know, I'm going to like the physiology of trauma, when these parts of our consciousness dissociate, what it's doing, it's disappearing and burying itself deep into our psyche. So there's a part of our identity that's literally just lost and buried in the subconscious. So this is basically what, you know, from a physiological, scientific perspective. You know, from a metaphysical or spiritual perspective, then we can say that, you know, these pieces get stuck in other time vectors, in other dimensions, because it's the same. You know, science is now recognizing that dimensions are akin to our levels of consciousness, and we've got multiple dimensions within our energetic matrix, within our blueprint. So that it is recognizing this, so it's actually all integrated. But again, ultimately, it comes down to the language that everybody speaks, depending on what, you know, what kind of system they are. I think I'm in kind of, I work with multiple systems. You know, I love to ground the kind of grounded practical information of kind of science, physiology with the metaphysical, because for me, it's all integrated. It's all one and the same. But ultimately, when these pieces fragment in and they get stuck in other time vectors, that could be past lives, other lifetimes, and it could also be timelines from childhood. But ultimately, these pieces of our consciousness or soul have fragmented, or our energy, but it also leaves that piece of ourselves vulnerable to demonic or parasitic intrusions, or being captured or taken over by negative spirits, negative beings. And this is where we start getting into the world of psychic attacks and astral interferences. Some of you may have experienced. I used to, before I really started this body of work, and I really went heavily into protecting my shields. And, you know, it took from years, I was fortifying my shield through all of the energy work and I was doing through food, and, you know, not because it's not just about fortifying the shields through energy work. We have to be conscious of what we're putting in the body. But I spent years working on strengthening my torus, my toroidal shield, my energetic membrane, wherever you want to call it, the aura, to stop these attacks. But I know I did have fragmentation. And it was only when I started working with the Akashic record and I did my own Akashic reading that I realized I had fragmentation. But ultimately, it leaves out these pieces susceptible to, as I said, psychic attacks or astral attacks, you know, night terrors, sleep paralysis, all of these different things that I go more into in the Akashic training. And we can identify all these aspects of ourselves. But ultimately, this can all cause terror and panic, which again can fragment the energy even more. So it can be just a continuation, and ultimately can lead to other, you know, addictive behaviors, and an individual trying to numb themselves to all of this through drinking, smoking, or whatever else they need to do. But ultimately, that piece of the soul can also return with a separate identity. And this is really common in abusive events, people that have experienced sexual abuse or, deep physical abuse. And it often, where an individual is fragmented to a real high percentage, because we talk about percentages in the training, but we can get into different percentages, and the higher percentage of soul fragmentation that you have, then we start getting into the world of denial and a complete splitting of character and separation of character and denial of character. And then when the person starts healing, that identity can return completely and feel like a completely separate identity. And this is where we start getting into the world of psychosis or dissociative identity disorder and other kind of personality disorders. So it can really cause so many other symptoms. And again, the trauma training that I did in the NARM model, they talk about, and again, this is not something that's talked about often in a lot of trauma. I mean, it might be now that NARM have brought this in because they're the latest. This is one of the latest groundbreaking researchers to my knowledge, but they associate ADD, OCD, ADHD, psychosis, sociopathy, psychopathy. These disorders are related to deep levels of CPTSD, where somebody has experienced adverse trauma and they've literally just completely shut off to the point they are apathetic, they can't feel. So then we start getting into this kind of world. Yeah, is that making sense? So ultimately, this can lead to the complete disruption of the autonomic nervous system, leading to chronic fight, flight, freeze responses that ultimately impair self-regulation and autonomy. Because this is dominating an individual's energy field. And again, this is unconscious. So when we start looking at this through a trauma lens, then, we can start expanding on these dynamics and understanding that it's ultimately all about bringing an individual into a sense of safety, nurturing an individual into a sense of safety so that they can organically reintegrate these fragmented parts. Because ultimately, as healers, it doesn't matter how much healing we offer, and I've experienced this myself. It was only I brought my fragments back to me. I did have a help of it. I was working with a shamanic healer who did help me to return one aspect of my consciousness. But ultimately, it's, we are the only ones that can really help ourselves to feel safe in our body. And we can have, healing can help us. It can help to bring us back into balance and feel and have a little bit more of a sense of safety, so that we can then, as I said, organically, these fragmented parts organically start to reintegrate, because we can't force a traumatized or terrorized piece of our consciousness back into our body when that part of our consciousness, or when the body does not feel safe for that fragmented aspect. Does that make sense? I've been working with 2 clients in America, which is just really kind of interesting that they came to me around about the same time, 2 different young people who have both been diagnosed with psychosis and schizophrenia, and neither of them are psychotic or have schizophrenia. They're literally just completely fragmented. So I've been working with them, and this takes time to work with somebody who's completely fragmented. And again, all of these illnesses or disorders or diseases, I don't like using these words that the doctor give people, because when doctors start telling you that you've got this disorder, this disease, what that's actually doing is implanting a belief into your consciousness. And you can choose to take on that belief and reinforce it. So it builds, it gets worse. And then you attach to that, the identity of that. Or you can choose to, I'm not taking on that. I'm not listening to the doctor. I don't take on this. You know, I haven't got a disorder or a disease. You know, you're just going through a process. But ultimately, when we start getting into the world of people having chronic fatigue and chronic fatigue related illnesses like, you know, fibromyalgia or ME and all these other, I can't even list all of these, you know, things that people are experiencing, but generally it's all a result of chronic fatigue through their body being so stressed and dysregulated, likely because there is energetic / soul fragmentation / soul loss / dissociation. And again, most people don't even realize it. It's a really common issue, and it's something that shows up in nearly every single one of my Akashic readings where there's unresolved trauma, whether it's past life trauma that the soul has chosen to carry into this lifetime to work through, or whether it's childhood trauma. It's really common that there is, you know, energetic fragmentation or, you know, deep level soul fragmentation. It's very common. And this could be, again, physical trauma, or it could be spiritual trauma from, you know, entity attacks, astral attacks, parasitic attachments. Again, all of the micro traumas that we're experiencing from the collective, the bombardment of propaganda that we're having. But ultimately, all of this can result in an individual feeling completely lost, shut down, disconnected, purposeless, questioning themselves, what's wrong with me? I can't heal. They're stuck in unhealable patterns, just completely dysregulated. And I was one of these people too, which is why I got into the world of healing. And again, I had no idea, but I was having lots of healings. And it was only when I started working with my Akashic record that I could go in and actually access these parts and start to retrieve them. And as I said, it damages and distorts the biofields, you know, creating leaks and holes and ultimately manifesting. It manifests down the line as either spiritual or mental or emotional or physical dis-ease. Because, of course, our energetic body, our energy matrix, our soul matrix can't vibrate at its optimum frequency. And it can also result in memory loss, emotional distortions, over-empathy, hypersensitivity, hypervigilance, nervousness, anxiety, confusion, etc., etc. And a lot of time when we feel like oversensitive to things, to noise, it's like, is it because you've been doing so much spiritual work that your frequency is so high that anything of a low vibration literally just grates on your body, which is definitely something that I feel now. But previously it was because I was so dysregulated. Now I can tap into, now I understand, as doing all of this work, I understand, okay, is this a part of me that's dysregulated and this is what's grating on my nervous system? Or is it because my frequency is just high and this noise is just such an awful low vibratory noise that it's literally just giving my body the heebie-jeebies. But you can ask your higher self, you know, is this my nervous system? Is this dysregulation? Or is it just my frequency? Ultimately, you know, if you recognize it's your frequency, then the only thing you can do is take yourself out of that situation, because what you don't want to do is to allow that low vibration to pull you back down. But if it is your nervous system, then it's a really good practice to sit in that noise and allow your body to integrate it so that you can start regulating the nervous system. And we do this obviously through breath work and just sitting there and being in the heart, you know, really connecting to your heart and just connecting to that love and talking to your body, telling your body, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe. It's okay. Everything is okay. Because what you're doing is you're communicating to your cells that everything is okay. And ultimately, your body will begin to decompress. Yeah, does that make sense? Is that landing with anybody? Okay, just let me check the messages. We've got a few messages from people, so I'll just check the messages to see if there's any questions or anything. 100% makes sense. Yes, 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 yes. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know it's this information is just it's priceless, to be honest, but it does all make sense. But ultimately, on a physical level, if there is dissociation and fragmentation, then you may be feeling constantly depleted, scattered, ungrounded, vulnerable to energies, vulnerable to noises. I've just been saying. It could also result in you being, stuck in fight, flight, or functional freeze, stuck in survival mode. Ultimately, all of this blocking your quantum potential, blocking your potential to happiness, joy, and abundance. And as healers, a lot of time, and I see this because my niche is healers. I work with healers. I don't work with the regular, normal people now because this is, the path that I've taken with the trainings. But ultimately, I noticed that there's a lot of disembodied healers out there who haven't done this deeper work because they don't know, especially when we're new to healing and we start coming into, as I did, probably 18 years ago or when I did my Reiki training and I thought, oh, I'm a healer now. I had zero clue how little I knew back then, how inexperienced I was. And of course, we start to learn and, we learn about things and we experience things and we grow, of course. And, if I knew back then what I knew now, how my life would have changed. And this is ultimately why I created my training programs, because it's an accelerator pathway to help people to fast track through all of the 10, 15 years of my own healing. Because as I said, it was only when I started working with the Akashic Record that I literally fast tracked. And it's not, fast tracking and not working through my traumas at all. It's integrating. It's all about integration. But we're not impervious here. My point is healers are not impervious to all of this, to fragmentation. Because like I said, if it's not already present, we can become more susceptible to psychic attacks, energetic attacks, due to our energetic sensitivity, due to our frequency, due to our empathic nature. And spiritual parasites are really common issues that affect anybody at any time. But again, as healers, we can be targets. I don't like using that word either, but just to express a point, we can also be targets of parasites. They want our light. Like we're literally caviar to these parasites. And at some point in your healer experience, if you haven't already, then you may experience parasites, psychic attacks. Has anybody experienced these already? The likelihood is yes, which is why you're all here. But ultimately, the only thing that can block these parasites is just fortifying your energetic membrane, your auric shield, and keeping it really protected and reinforced. Because ultimately, as healers and facilitators, when our own energetic matrix is fractured, whether it's through our own experiences, our own wounds, our own traumas, what we're picking up from the collective, picking up entities and parasites from clients, or even from poor spiritual hygiene, which is super common, as I've mentioned already. It's really common for healers because we're so invested in helping others that we can quite often neglect our own practice, our own cleanliness. But it can result in us picking up these entities. And of course, these entities, whether it's an energetic entity, an emotional entity, anger, hatred, rage, anything that's out there, the people that we're working with, or whether it's a kind of spirit entity, this can also fragment our energetic matrix. And as I said, there's a lot of healers out there who are disembodied and unfortunately unconsciously causing potential harm to their clients. Because a lot of healers also project their own unconscious shadow biases onto people, their own judgments and opinions and perspectives. Because, it's something else that we all experience when we start getting into healing world, that we go into this spiritual ego and we think, well, we just have this sense of, I'm doing this spiritual work, so I'm impervious to all of this. But no, and that's getting into the world of spiritual ego. And of course, many healers are not trauma informed. So they're not talking from a safe trauma informed perspective, and they're just literally projecting biases and opinions onto their clients, which can trigger people into, re-traumatization. So ultimately, when we heal these fragmented aspects and we're doing this work, then, it's going to result in all around, benefit for ourselves and of course our clients. Because when we're not, as healers, when we are fragmented ourselves, we're attracting the wrong clients, so, we can lose our sense of direction, not having clear intentions, relinquishing or losing our creative abilities, our own channels becoming distorted and blocked. As we're picking up entities and energy from other people, our own intuition and discernment can be off, which ultimately then we can start getting into the world of giving people information from judgment and belief from the lower mind rather than intuitively tapping into the higher mind, which is what we should all be doing as healers with our clients, that we're coming at them from the higher mind and not the lower mind perspective. So perpetuating kind of compromising and toxic situations that we don't want to be in and we don't want to put our clients in. Is that making sense? Okay, I'll just check to see if there are any questions. If you've got any questions, just pop them in. Yeah, fight, flight, mostly in survival mode. Yeah, and I was too. Yeah, and absolutely, for those healers who've got gifts, I won't mention any names, but you all know who you are. But those of you out there with all these beautiful gifts that are not working, that you are doing a huge disservice to your clients because you've got so much wisdom. And ultimately, all of this, your traumas and all of this becomes your superpower when you heal it in yourself. So, make it your life mission to work through all of this, because ultimately, when we start getting into the, as I'm talking about, the lower mind and the higher mind, ultimately this, fragmentation it's not just impacting the physical body and the emotional body or the mental body, but it's ultimately impacting the spiritual body of our fifth dimensional mental body. So we start getting into the 5D realm, and it's, this is the higher mind consciousness, or our super consciousness, basically the subconscious. So a lot of people relate the subconscious to negative, but it's not. It's ultimately the subconscious holds all our positive and negative experiences, all our experiences. This is basically what the Akashic record is. And the higher mind, the fifth dimensional aspect of the mind, is what intuits and deciphers and filters and records everything. So when this is off, we can't intuit, we can't discern. It's literally offline. Our ability to connect and discern becomes distorted. And this is when we can start getting into the world of self-doubt and lack of self-belief, and we can end up sabotaging our potential. And as I said, doing a huge disservice to our community. So having that understanding that, we're not just talking about the physical body and the mental body, the emotional body, but the higher mind, because the energy body is multi-layered. There are multiple dimensional aspects to it. And ultimately, when we're talking about soul fragmentation, we're talking about the 3 levels of the soul, which is the 4th dimensional, 5th dimensional, and 6th dimensional aspect of our consciousness, of our energetic matrix or soul matrix. And then when we start getting into the oversoul matrix, then we're going into the 7th, 8th, 9th dimensional aspects. So the fragmentation it tends to just happen within the lower soul, the soul matrix, in the 4th, 5th, 6th dimensional, which is basically the astral body, the 4th dimensional lower astral body, the 5th dimensional mid astral body, and the 5th dimensional is the upper astral body. But then also it can impact the oversoul. So we're getting into the higher dimensional aspects, because as I said, it's not just a one-dimensional layer. So you can see how, when we are fragmented in any way, how we can be, impacted. And ultimately, it can also disrupt our collective soul memory. And of course, we've had a lot of indoctrination and corruption within our soul memory matrix. due to all of the, the propaganda and the micro traumas from societal and cultural and the genocides, the wars, etc. So it's vital to address and reintegrate all these amputated parts, because otherwise, this dissociation can manifest, as I've mentioned already, it can manifest as chronic mental illness or physical illness, and then lead to DID and PTSD, CPTSD, and as I said, ADD, ADHD, OCD, all of these disorders that are not recognized by most, doctors, general practitioners, but it's been recognized within the NARM model training, which is the neural affective model that I trained in, the trauma that I trained in, which, as I said, is the latest groundbreaking research. And that's what I talk about for those of you who've done the Akashic training with me, that's what I talk about in the trauma awareness masterclass. It's very, very important. But ultimately, all of this diminishes our spiritual sovereignty. So I'm just going to talk about, just before we jump into the meditation, because I'm just aware of the time, I'm just going to start getting into some symptoms. But I also want to just stress, I mentioned very briefly before about, the percentage of soulless when we start getting into percentages. And again, I'll send you this information, but this is something we get into in the Akashic training and understanding the percentages. And I'll update all of you who's done the Akashic training with me. I'll send you out all the new material. So don't worry. Before anybody asks me, Mia, we didn't do this in the last training. I've updated everything. So I'm going to send all that out to you when I've finished editing and integrating it. Before anybody asks me, because as I said, half the people here are my trainees. But ultimately, the percentage of soul loss can determine the extremity of an individual's mental and emotional state, and ultimately getting into the kind of spectrum of these disorders, as I've mentioned, schizophrenia, psychosis, ADD, ADHD. And I've done a lot of readings for parents with children who they've come to me with, can you help? I've got a child with, I think my child might be ADHD or schizophrenic or going through psychosis or something, can you help? And when I've gone into their Akashic record, they're literally just fragmented. Or on the flip side of that, they're also little indigos. Again, I'm not going to get into that world because that's another webinar for another day. But also I do get into it in the Akashic training as well. But yes, a lot of the rainbow children, the indigos that are coming through, they're coming in with high frequency. They're on a completely different level of frequency, and they just can't deal with this matrix, this 3D matrix. But as I've said already, when we start getting into this world, we can really, if you do work with anybody who has schizophrenia, then, an Akashic reading is great, because that will help you to identify, as I said, when we get into percentages, and we understand a higher level of percentage and where the psychosis is coming from. However, what we don't want to be doing is diagnosing people or telling them, you don't have psychosis, you don't have schizophrenia if they're on medication, and then people stopping the medication. We're not getting into that world, but we can obviously bring it into their awareness. But it's not something, as I said, I'm going to go into too much here, but just be aware of that, that we're not diagnosing people, we're not telling people to stop medications, we're not telling people, oh, it's probably because you've got soul fragmentation, because people can genuinely have a really chronic chemical imbalance that is literally causing these disorders. They could have blocked melatonin or blocked serotonin or all of the feel-good. It's all trauma related ultimately. Chemical imbalances stem from emotional, energetic imbalances, which is all, for me, trauma related anyway. But again, we don't want to start getting into that world of diagnosing. So it's always, delivering the information to them, but just from a awareness perspective, and something that we can make a suggestion to them. So we're not telling them, oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other. And as I said, then the client goes out and stops taking the medication, and then ends up with really issues that then comes back on us. So just be really aware of that. So retrieving these parts of our soul helps an individual to re-establish their sovereignty their integrity, and their autonomy. So this is like the three main, this is the framework that we want to be working with, because when somebody has lost sovereignty and autonomy, they're literally just not themselves. They're literally just giving themselves to other people. And again, as I mentioned, this can be from past life or present life. So ultimately, when we go into the meditation, then you can, if you've not had any childhood trauma that you're aware of, I mean, this could be something that you've blocked out, but if it's not something that you're aware of, then it could be past life. So ask for both. So just check my notes. It can be really hard for an individual who has fragmentation or dissociation to also have an awareness of the trauma. So I had complete memory block. I couldn't remember. And from my childhood, I had quite a lot of trauma in my childhood, unfortunately. But I could not remember anything from before the age of 20 until I started doing this level of work, because I completely blocked it out. So it's difficult. We can't heal these pieces of ourselves. We can't move on from these traumas, from these events, because this part of ourselves is missing. It's fragmented. So this is why a lot of people get stuck in these cycles of not being able to heal something, because there's fragmentation. And it's a kind of a catch-22, because it's like you can't heal that part of the soul that's fragmented, or that part of the energy or the consciousness that's fragmented. But you could also, that part of the consciousness or soul will not reintegrate back into the body because the body doesn't feel safe. So again, it ultimately comes down to a sense of safety and communicating with the body that it's safe, and really orientating people into a sense of safety. And we can do that through breath work and communicating, asking, working with our clients to communicate with the body. Just keep telling, that one key thing that I learned in my training was the process of reorientating somebody. When somebody goes into a trigger, like a real terror trigger or a fear trigger, or, it's a trauma reaction, it's like, just look around, take a minute, look around you. Are you in any physical danger right now? No. And the minute you do that, the body just, it decompresses. And that is, and then it's like, okay, so just communicate to your body that you're safe. There's nothing. And of course, if they are in danger, then they need to get the hell out of there pretty quick. But generally, it's not like this. So I've worked with a few clients who've come to me in emergency situations where they've been really just having a major panic attack, hyperventilating. Thankfully, this has only happened 2 or 3 times, but that's what I've done with them. Literally just reorientated them, and they've immediately just started decompressing. And then it's like, just tap on just breathe and come back into your body. Let yourself come back into your body. Because ultimately, when they're in that hypervigilant state, they're in that panic, that terror, boom, that's fragmentation. That's fragmentation that's happening. They literally start dissociating. So we need to bring them back into their body. Okay. So let's just go through all of that. So I've talked about all of that. I've talked about all of that. All right. So yeah, when we're working with this in the Akashic training, we really go into establishing the present life age. So where an individual they can't remember a particular trauma, then we can identify that for them, because we're literally going into their subconscious with their permission. We're not taking them into a hypnosis. We're doing this on their behalf. We are going into a theta state so we can access their higher self, communicating with their soul, with their higher self, and we can identify the age, so that when we bring that conscious awareness to them, it often triggers a memory of an event that they experienced, and so they can better release it. Because ultimately, when we have acknowledgement and we have awareness of what we've experienced, this is when we can start to organically start to reintegrate these pieces of our soul. We can encourage that piece to come back, so the body starts coming back into wholeness. But as I said, if it's a past life experience, then we might need to take we might need to go into, again, depending on the severity of the fragmentation, we might need to go into a regression, but not always. Sometimes we can do it for the client on their behalf. So again, just be aware of that. But ultimately, this is where a client may need to work deeper. We can help them to a point, but sometimes clients need to work a little bit deeper. And we don't need to re-traumatize them. We don't need to take them back into the trauma. Some people might need to acknowledge it on a deeper level, but we don't need to take them necessarily into the trauma. We can just take them into the experience, but just, again, bringing that sense of safety, which you'll experience when we do the journey shortly. And finally, before I jump into the symptoms and then the meditation, the last thing I want to talk about is that we can also uphold soul fragmentation from another soul, where, aspects of their energy or soul has attached to us. And this is really common in entanglements and enmeshments with others, where we may have experienced a trauma in another lifetime or in childhood or at any point that we may have experienced trauma. And it's often with a loved one, with a parent, a sibling, partner, a grandparent. It's somebody that we have been deeply connected to, that we could have picked up their missing fragments. And holding soul loss from others can result in us being out of integrity. It can also result in personality distortions, in confusion, in unexplained emotions, and also inconsistencies, because obviously we're upholding pieces of somebody else. So we can really be tapping into their energy and it's not ours. And we might even be aware of, like, this is not my energy. Sometimes we might feel that, but we might not even be aware of that we're actually holding, somebody else's fragmented parts. So ultimately, we want to restore this. We want to return these fragmented parts to the original soul, so that they can restore their blueprint and move on. Because holding soul loss from another is energetically draining. It can, we can really feel like there's some personality distortion, chronic mood swings, and it can result in toxic trauma bonding and codependency. So yeah, again, we go deeper into that in the Akashic training for anybody who's curious about that. So symptoms of fragmentation, as I've mentioned already: collective societal microtraumas from fear propaganda. I've talked about all that already. We can, collective ancestral trauma, generational trauma. We can inherit trauma imprints from our ancestors, from our parents. And ultimately, not necessarily that it's causing fragmentation, but it can lead to fragmentation, because we can be deeply impacted by, the energy of our bloodline, our ancestors, and it can result in, a lack of autonomy and sovereignty, because we're perpetuating somebody else's trauma. Ultimately, we can take on the ancestral karmic debt, which is very common in healers. And also common in people who have chosen in this lifetime to work through their ancestral contracts. Some people are not really aware of it. But ultimately, all of this, all this, fragmentation, ultimately, it dysregulates the HP axis in the brain, which ultimately affects the amygdala. And, again, I'm not going to go into the real kind of science of it because we don't have time, but it can result in a loss of, again, the loss of autonomy through impacting people's prefrontal control. As I said, it's really impacting the brain. So we're not just talking about it energetically and spiritually, but on a physical level. We start getting into the science of it. It's affecting the different parts of the brain and the chemicals in the brain. Ultimately, we've got personal traumas. Often fragmentation occurs through abuse, neglect, abandonment, betrayal, rejection, loss, being bullied. Again, the consciousness splitting off when it feels unsafe. Any incident where we've had our safety violated. Spiritual traumas, I've mentioned already, through psychic attacks, astral attacks, entity attacks, and of course past life traumas, which we can class it as kind of a spiritual trauma because it's energetic. It's not something that we're dealing with on a physical level in this lifetime, but it's impacting our physicality, our third dimensional reality. but we can also be impacted by, you know, past life traumas and persecutions from other lifetimes, and also curses and vows, you know, anything where we compromised our integrity. Is this all making sense? Anything where we've felt this lack of safety. Symptoms of fragmentation, as I've mentioned already, that it causing mental and emotional dysregulation and lack of, I'll send you all the symptoms so I don't have to go, because there's quite a long list of symptoms, but you know, these can all result in, you know, from grief, from abuse, as I said already, from fear, terror, panic. And all of this literally can switch the brain off online. So we can struggle with chronic fatigue, low energy, unexplained aches and pains, tension, weakened immune system, frequent illnesses, just feeling completely disembodied, lost, like not whole, wandering around life aimlessly, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, memory loss, feeling completely scattered, can't focus, sleep paralysis, intrusive thoughts, negative self-talk, recurring nightmares, and just a general sense of being completely out of body. Emotional symptoms can be like this inability, just feeling numb and just jaded, numb, inability to feel joy, love, connection, just chronic sadness, anger or fear, addictive behaviors, turning to substance abuse to fill a void, spiritual symptoms, disconnection from your higher purpose, your soul purpose, a disconnection from, a benevolent higher power, loss of intuition, feeling stuck in repetitive patterns. And then when we start getting into spiritual dissociation, so just briefly to talk about spiritual dissociation, which is all relative, and ultimately the symptoms kind of cross over because, you know, they overlap with our psychological and physiological dissociation, you know, especially in physical trauma related cases. But the symptoms of spiritual dissociation are less talked about. It's not something that anybody talks about. I've never come across anybody talking about spiritual dissociation, and it's actually, you know, something that this is just something that's recently come online for me, is going more, you know, actually and witnessing what's happening and seeing this kind of psychological dissociation, which we can call spiritual dissociation. And, you know, it's, as I said, the symptoms overlap, but it is generally having a complete disconnection from a purpose or meaning. You know, no beliefs, no values, no spiritual practice, because there's just no motivation for any of it. It's like feeling this existential void, feeling alienated, alone, isolated, shut off from a higher power or universal connection, just feeling completely alone, like what's the point? And this sense of loss from being part of a community or tribe or from a, you know, a cosmic order or a larger whole, not able to pray or communicate or feel energy, you know, just this complete numbness to spiritual experiences, not wanting to participate in any spiritual rituals because you might have already experienced trauma from ritualistic abuse, whether it's past life abuse, satanic ritual abuse, or, you know, whatever that is, that there's just this fear of it. So not wanting to meditate or worship, and that when I say worship, it's like worshiping yourself. You are the God, the creator, but just having this diminished sensitivity to your intuitive or your mystical gifts, insights, and wisdom. And also feeling like your spiritual self, this is really, really common, just separating your spiritual self from your everyday identity. This is super common, and this is something that I did. But once I became aware of it, I integrated it. So it's like when I had a normal job, a 3D job, and I was in corporate, and then I was like half the week in my corporate job and half the week doing healing and spiritual stuff. And it was a massive conflict, but I was creating that conflict. And then once I realized, I had a session with a lady in Ibiza years ago, in 2008, and she said to me, it's not separate. And once I realized, like, oh wow, I've been doing this, And once I realized, okay, everything's spiritual, everything, it's not separate, everything changed. And so I didn't get up in the morning and hate my job. I started seeing it as I'm actually giving a service to somebody, what I'm doing in my corporate job. And I'm also earning really good money at the same time. And that money I can put to good use. I can give to charities. I can do really nice things with it. So again, it's just coming into that space. But ultimately, spiritual dissociation can result in complete despair, cynicism towards, resistance towards spirituality, a skepticism or distrust towards any beliefs or spiritual communities. I've kind of gone through this a little bit myself, but I think a lot of this is relative to what's been happening in the world with all of the, the psychic attacks and imposter guides and all of this kind of stuff. So I've had to like rein myself back in a little bit with that. But ultimately, yeah, just feeling untethered and just completely disconnected, knowing a guidance, and again, this all overlaps a little bit. So anyway, I will kind of end that there because then I want to get into the final journey. But ultimately, the final piece I'll say about that is, the concept of spiritual dissociation, although it's not discussed in the mainstream or by any trauma-informed spaces, we can describe it as, people can associate this feeling of being shut off from the higher power or shut off from God or shut off from source. So this can, help people to understand, okay, yeah, there might be spiritual dissociation. And this is, as I said, the knock-on effect of not having full sovereignty and full autonomy of our spirit, soul, energy. If that makes sense. So yeah, just drop me a thumbs up or just a little, if that makes any sense to you, if you're really landing, if that's all landing with you. I'm just checking the comments. Yeah, I have fear that I'm here to heal others, but not able to help them. Yeah, some people just like our attention and empathy. Yeah, absolutely. I'm having trouble identifying the problem with why I'm having this pain in my left shoulder blade. Okay, so you can go into that. Anything that's coming up for you that I'm kind of triggering from the information, then, you can bring, write that down and include it in the journey that we're going to do in a minute. I think why I'm not working with it. Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you for your comments. And all right, so yeah, get yourselves comfortable. And if you've got your video on, just maybe you might want to turn it off. Allow yourself to completely relax. So this journey will be about 40 minutes. So we might run over by a few minutes, like a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, but not too long because the journey will be about 40 minutes. Maybe a little bit less. So we're going to go into retrieve any fragmented parts if you have any fragmented parts. And as I said already, there may not be. You may be really aware of this work and you may have been doing this level of work. So, but you may release something anyway. So, as I always say in all my trainings and all my meditations, expect the unexpected. Because ultimately, the goal is to restore your energetic matrix. It's to restore your soul matrix, your blueprint, and restoring spiritual sovereignty, where even if you may not have any fragmentation, there might be aspects of you that are not fully spiritually sovereign. So give yourself permission to let go of any self-doubt and give yourself permission to believe 100% in your gifts and abilities. And start dropping into your breath. Again, breathing in deeply into the heart space, breathing in peace, breathing in love. Giving yourself permission to be more clear with your intentions. Giving yourself permission to become more whole in your everyday life so that you can manifest your soul tribe, your soul aligned clients, and stop sabotaging your own purpose. And give yourself permission to safely and gently retrieve all your fragmented aspects and heal all unresolved traumas. Anything that is ready to be put to bed and completed and released. And again, we don't always have to know what that is. Sometimes it's just tell yourself, I'm ready, I give myself permission, and trust that your wisdom, your body intelligence will facilitate this for you on your behalf, your higher self, your soul guides. And for those of you who may work with spirit intelligence, just make sure that you're connecting to organic, eternal soul guides or spirit guides. Make that really clear so that you're not just calling in a random angel or a random guide, or that you're making a clear and conscious choice to only connect to eternal, organic, benevolent beings. That way it prevents you from inviting in any imposters masquerading as spirit. A lot of people are not even aware of this. This is where we start getting into the world of intrusions. But give yourself permission to reclaim any lost sovereignty or autonomy so that you may return to a place of pure wholeness, that you're returning your blueprint to its optimum capacity so you may function as a cohesive whole. And as you breathe and feel yourself relaxing, just feel yourself connected to the earth, to the ground. Feel roots extending down from your feet, anchoring you into the stability and nurturing core of the earth. This allows you to activate the parasympathetic nervous system for this felt sense of safety. And you may affirm that by stating, my body is safe. I am sovereign and here and now. Just allow yourself a moment to scan for any tension as you breathe. And if you become aware of any tension, just give yourself permission to fully and completely release that tension and relax. Breathing in love and compassion to that point of tension, whether it's in the face, jaw, shoulders, chest, hips, the arms. Just breathing in love and compassion, telling your body, communicating with your body that your body is safe and you are sovereign and you are here and you are now. And I invite you to take yourself into a safe space. So imagine you're in a place where you feel completely safe. And that may be your home, your room. It may be out in nature, in a forest, in a field, by the beach. But just take yourself into a place where you feel relaxed, safe. And just feel that sense of safety in your body. And I invite you now to invite in a person or a being who you feel completely safe with. And it could be a partner, a parent, a sibling, or even your dog or your cat. But inviting a being to be with you, a person who loves you unconditionally, and you feel completely safe and protected with this being in this safe space. And this is a fundamental practice in trauma healing, that we take our clients into this safe space with a safe person, so that any time through this meditation or in the future that you feel unsafe or scared, bring yourself back to this space, this frequency set point of safety. Bringing yourself back to the breath. So you're returning to this safe place with your safe person. And ultimately proceeding at your own pace, taking responsibility for your own healing, your own empowerment, and your own sense of safety. So again, if anything at any time feels uncomfortable, just bring yourself immediately back to your breath, to your heart, and into this safe space with your person. And once you felt that calmness, that relaxation, imagine around you a protective shield of light. Maybe reconnecting back to that shield that you activated at the very beginning. And this is your quantum field. This shield of safety and protection. And I invite you to bring your awareness to your higher heart. So just below your throat, above your heart chakra, to the higher heart. And imagine a platinum gold Merkaba in the heart. So two interconnected pyramids that form a three-dimensional. So imagine two pyramids, three-dimensional pyramid, interconnecting, one pointing upward, the other pointing downward. And this Merkaba shield represents your geometrical light body. And it's the divine masculine and divine feminine part of you. The upward pointing tetrahedron or pyramid is the male counterpart, and the downward pointing tetrahedron or pyramid is the female. And the piece in the middle is the unification of these 2 points. So as you connect to that center point of your Merkaba, that 0 point unification, begin to expand the Merkaba around you using the power of your breath. As you inhale, expanding it across your chest, and as you exhale, pushing it out in front of you and around you until it's sitting inside of your shield. So you're creating an extra layer of protection. And you will use the Merkaba vehicle to carry you up into the quantum field to retrieve your soul aspects as I guide you. So imagine your Merkaba shield is surrounded by these spheres of protection with our etheric fire and the mirror, giving you this extra fortification of psychic and astral protection. And imagine yourself in the very center of the Merkaba. And begin to feel yourself traversing, sending the Merkaba vehicle with this portion of your consciousness, your soul body, up into the quantum field. And if you can't imagine, just intend this to happen. I now send my soul body, my Merkaba, up into the quantum field. And as you traverse up, you enter the quantum field, your Akashic field. You may become aware of, as you consciously make that connection, to enter or open or connect to your Akashic record. And as you make that command to connect to your Akashic record, you may become aware suddenly of an image or an energy or a sense of, and this may appear as a portal of light or a library of information, of books and scriptures, but allowing your Merkaba that is carrying your soul body to enter into your Akashic record. And imagine this as a huge, beautiful portal or library of consciousness. And connect to your higher self. You may make a command like, I now connect to my true, eternal higher self, wisdom, to receive divine guidance. And you may communicate to your higher self that you are ready to reclaim all parts of yourself that have been lost, fragmented, and to release all associated pains, limitations, all blocks. And just becoming aware of what's around you, this vast portal of light containing this wisdom and intelligence. Asking your higher self to assist you, to journey with you, to hold you in this safe, loving container and illuminating your path. And ask your higher self intelligence to show you what it is that you need to know right now as you journey. If there is anything, is there any fragmentation present? You may feel this already. When you ask that question, you may receive a yes or a no. But if you're unsure, just ask to be shown. And you may be taken into a specific emotion or experience. It may be a past life or a childhood wound that you're aware of. But if nothing shows up, just set these clear intentions, because you may not receive anything right now in this moment because of the fragmentation, because of the lack of sovereignty and autonomy, because of spiritual dissociation. But when we start setting these intentions, you're creating a vacuum for this to manifest into your physicality. And this will occur over the coming hours or days. So just be aware that even if you don't receive anything in this moment, that you will receive something at some point. And this may be in a dream state, or it may be when you're in the bath, shopping, even driving the car when you're least expecting it. So giving consent to your higher self to show you anything that you need to know right now that may have led to any spiritual fragmentation, soul fragmentation. And you may receive multiple pieces of information, or you may receive just one significant piece of information. And you may ask, what actually led to this fragmentation? Show me. Because I'm ready to release this with love. I'm ready to heal and move forward wholly and completely and reclaim autonomy and sovereignty. Give yourself permission to receive guidance, information, and give yourself permission to see anything you may need to see, anything that your higher self is trying to show you. And you may become aware of implants or cords in your body. So as you're in this container, and as your body continues to traverse in the fabric of space-time, you may become aware of yourself traversing through time zones, through time vectors, through the dimensions. And this could be taking you into an experience from another lifetime or a childhood experience. Maintain that connection to your breath. So you're present, you're not drifting off into a dream space. Just keep connecting to the breath, knowing that you're safe. And now I invite you, as you traverse through the quantum field, deeper into the fabric of space-time, imagine that you're passing an artificial hologram that may appear as a dark-colored vortex of space-time. And this is the artificial matrix that we are all plugged into. So just take a moment to observe this artificial matrix hologram. See it above you or underneath you, that you're separate from this hologram. But there's a cord attached to this hologram. And it's attached to your solar plexus, or it may be attached to your navel. So just witnessing that for a moment, and then imagine as you continue to traverse the vastness of the quantum field, you become aware of a magnificent quantum vortex, a swirling, spiraling plasma light wave spectrum with all the colors of the aurora quantum. And this hologram, this vortex, is the organic primordial matrix, our true poles of a Menti, the 0 point singularity of true source. And take a moment to feel the vibrant organic frequencies of this wave spectrum magnetizing you closer. And see a cord that is attached at the base of your spine to this primordial organic quantum field. And feel, sense, or imagine yourself moving closer into this quantum vortex. And feel the nourishing plasma currents enveloping you as you pass through the center of this quantum vortex, and your soul body begins to integrate with this quantum frequency, like you're having a bath of pure, organic, healing plasma energy. And feel your soul body like you're inside a washing machine, having a thorough cleanse in this plasma vortex. And the plasma is pulsating pure light into your soul body, restoring your core light body template. And as you bask in this beautiful aurora quantum plasma energy, just bring to your mind's eye again these two umbilical cords. One connecting you at the solar plexus or the navel into the artificial matrix, the matrix of pain, limitation, control. And the other cord connecting you to the primordial field, the true source origin of our 0 point. This is the field of quantum potentiality. And witnessing this iridescent cord that's connecting you to the primordial field. And witness the cord connecting you to the artificial matrix is dark and grey. And as the plasma heals your soul body, begin to witness the artificial cord beginning to dissolve into the plasma field. As the organic higher wave spectrum just dissolves this artificial cord completely until you are liberated from the artificial matrix. And as this artificial cord disappears, it creates a void within the sacral or within the solar plexus, the navel area, and pull in plasma light into this void, sealing it. And as you pull in this plasma light into this void where the artificial cord once was, your primordial field cord begins to expand, becoming your one true source of pure, vital life force energy, cleansing and restoring you at quantum level. And as you start to feel yourself returning to wholeness, imagine or just become aware of hundreds of tiny particles of light all around you. And each of these particles represents a fragmented aspect of your energy, your soul, your spirit. These are all fractals of your consciousness that have been lost, stolen, amputated, or separated across other time vectors and timelines in other reality fields, in other dimensions. And this could be hundreds throughout millennia. And begin to recall each of these particles, each of these fractals. And as each of these fractals return to you, they pass through the center of the spiraling primordial quantum vortex of 0-point singularity, each particle being cleansed, purified, healed, and restored at quantum level. And as you call your fragments back, you may say something like, beloved aspects, I invite you, if you feel safe, to return in wholeness. You are safe, and your power restores my sovereignty. And just feeling each part drawing into the core of your being, witnessing. And you may become aware of any etheric astral implants, cords, hooks, plugs, or anything in your field begins to disperse and dissolve. All associated plugs connecting you to the artificial matrix, connecting you to other time zones, any cords, any tethers. Just become aware of any quantum entanglements with any other soul from other lifetimes. Setting an intention to release all these quantum entanglements, cutting all negative cords and tethers from any other lifetimes, from any other soul, from any experiences that you may be aware of, any that you're unaware of. Just making these statements to release any implants, hooks, cords, tethers, anything that may be blocking you or preventing you from moving forward, from healing. And as you release all these implants, cords, hooks, devices, make sure that you fill any voids where these implants or hooks or tethers have been. Filling these voids or any tears in your membrane, in your shield, filling them with quantum plasma creator substance, sealing all voids where any quantum entanglements have been, where any enmeshments, any cords, any hooks, any tethers, so that these cords, tethers, enmeshments, entanglements cannot return or be replaced by anything else. And I invite you to revoke and release any associated contracts or agreements that you may have made with any other soul, or any contracts that are binding you to old trauma timelines. You revoke and release and delete these contracts and agreements now. Anything that is unserving, anything ready to be released, anything that is holding you. And feel all these dissociated parts returning and merging. Feel all barriers dissolving. Feel the whole of your energetic matrix, your quantum grid, lighting up to full capacity. And as each of these soul parts come back, affirming I am 100% whole and complete, autonomous and sovereign. I disallow any external forces from holding any aspects of my energy. And as you feel all these parts of you being returned, you may become aware of emotion or associated with a fractal, with a particle, allowing yourself to release through the breath. Because as each emotion is released, each imprint is dissolving, leaving only the lessons and the wisdom of the experience in its place. Because ultimately, all of these experiences can become our superpower once we've healed them. And invite your body to be fully healed and released from all pain and suffering. As all these inherited genetic imprints are dissolved, anything that you've inherited from the generational bloodlines, from the ancestral bloodlines, from the collective, any karmic debt, any fragments that you're carrying from any other souls are released. And as all these aspects, any fragments from any other souls are released, just return these fragmented aspects to their rightful owner, to the source, purified and healed. And witness these fragmented parts passing through the quantum plasma vortex before they are returned to the rightful owner for restoration. You may make a statement like, I now return all fragmented parts that I'm holding from a loved one, returning it to its rightful source for healing and completion. So this soul can move forward with his or her life. And witnessing your geometrical body, your light body, your soul body, returning to complete wholeness. Feeling yourself connected to your own true source code as you connect to the organic primordial field. Feeling your energetic encryption being completely restored. And inviting the intelligence of the primordial fields into your bodies and fields so that you're connecting to the wisdom of the primordial source code through your geometrical body, your Merkaba field. And inhaling a last breath of quantum plasma fully into the very core of your being. Witnessing your crystalline body being fully restored. This sense of wholeness and completion. And just setting an intention to allow your body over the coming days to restore all fragmented parts fully and completely. To restore all wounded aspects of your soul and your consciousness. So that you may move forward effortlessly with ease and grace. But allow the associated experiences to remain fully intact so that you may acknowledge, accept, and restore all parts. That you may heal and grow from these experiences so that these experiences become your superpower. And I invite you to set an intention to allow all these energies around you to be fully healed, fully restored across all time and space, throughout all planes, dimensions, and levels of consciousness. And acknowledge these stories as complete for all of time. And I invite you to communicate with your physical vessel, communicating that your physical vessel is a safe and loving container for all soul aspects to be returned and reintegrated fully and completely, so that you may operate as a cohesive whole, and that you are divinely and lovingly protected at all times. And so it is done. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take a moment to observe yourself surrounded with golden light and begin to traverse back down, reversing the process, traveling down in your Merkaba vehicle, bringing the Merkaba and your soul body back down through the crown, down into the heart. So you're reintegrating all soul aspects. To see all these tiny particles connecting to your bioenergy fields, sealing this integration into your body. And if you have any final commands or intentions, just setting those now. And knowing that this journey is a journey to empower you to navigate fragmentation and dissociation with loving compassion, restoring safety, sovereignty, and energetic wholeness through this integrated wisdom. I invite you to honor your path, honor your journey, honoring your soul, honoring your body, allowing this healing and transformation to unfold gently with ease and grace. And whenever you feel ready, feel the ground beneath you begin to connect to the earth, thanking your body, offering gratitude to Source for this day, for this life, for this experience. Begin to feel yourself coming fully back into your body, wiggling your fingers, your toes, rubbing your palms together, squeezing your arms, whatever it is that you need to do to allow yourself to fully come back into your body. And I invite you to journal, to rest, to become aware of any shifts over the next days, because we're working in the quantum field, so it can take some time for this to fully integrate into the physical body. So just take some time to allow this process to happen, making sure that you drink plenty of water throughout the next days, and be really gentle and kind to yourself. So if you can all just give me a thumbs up or something, so I know that you are all back from the journey. If you feel if you wish to comment in the chat your experience or anything that you may wish to, just take some time just to know you're all okay. Thank you, Susan. How are you all feeling? You're welcome, Nikki. How are you all feeling? Are you all okay? I know it can take some time to come back from a deep journey after we've been traversing in the quantum field, or sometimes it's nice to stay when we're in that vortex that we might not even want to come back. Or we just want to stay there because it's just such a beautiful space. But it's really important to make sure that you come back and you're grounded. And I just want to finish by saying, for anybody, the healers and who are called to work with this with their clients. Again, this was a general. It's we've got to be, again, just careful when we're leading groups that we just, it's a gentle retrieval session, because ultimately we can't go really deep with people. But when you're working one-to-one with a client, of course you can actually work with a client's particular experiences if they have any. So it's going to be a little bit different to how you might experience this in a group or in a one-to-one dynamic. Again, some of you may feel confident to do this, some of you may not. You may not feel, because it is, we have to be aware of, and as I said, if you're not trauma informed, then perhaps, if you're not really sure how to take somebody out of a re-traumatization, then just be aware. So when you're guiding a group, that it's a gentle, like this was, it's a powerful session, taking anybody into the quantum field, and everybody's going to have their own experience. But ultimately, when we're working in a group, that it's just a generalized kind of session and everybody will have their own experience. But again, in a one-to-one setting, we can go really deep with people into their own, taking people into cutting specific chords with specific people or with specific experiences. So, but ultimately it's ensuring that the space is safe, that it's a safe container, that we can take people into that safe space with a safe person. So anytime people can bring themselves back to that space so they're not spiraling. But as I said, it is an individual's responsibility, of course, but, people who are deeply traumatized and completely dissociated and not sovereign, then it can be really difficult for them to determine what's good and bad for them. So be really aware in this instance, because we don't want to, especially when we're working with people who might be, on the spectrum with, ADD, ADHD, or psychosis or schizophrenia again. But ultimately, the benefits of doing this retrieval is that what we're doing is reestablishing the integrity of one's divine blueprint. We're restoring the blueprint to wholeness. We're renewing this sense of completeness as we're calling all these parts back. And this will give you a greater sense of energy and vitality as your life force is returned to you, your soul essence is restored. It can help to release old wounds. So again, you might notice some releases over the next days as wounds release, stuck trauma in the body, stuck emotions release as you come back into emotional balance. You might be aware of improved energy, improved focus, improved memory. You might become aware of, again, and this can happen progressively. You might feel a stronger sense of connection to your higher self, to your intuition, a deeper connection to your spirituality, a strengthened, fortified aura that's, we've literally amplified, that's going to repel all these negative, intrusive energies. And you might feel, hopefully, more empowered, your personal powers returning to you, confidence, and a stronger sense of agency, and also improve relationships as a result of this. Because, as you become more empowered, and confident and you're fully back in your energy, then your boundaries start to become stronger and healthier because you are operating from this cohesive wholeness. So, but ultimately, hopefully, that's going to bring you further into a deeper alignment with your purpose. And so, yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this little mini training. And if any of you that are new to my work, if you're called to working with the Akashic training, the upcoming training in September, just drop me a message and we can chat. Or I can send you the link and you can have a look. Or if any of you are called to work with me on deeper level, one-to-one, then again, just reach out. And yeah, I hope that you have a beautiful day. And I'm always here for any support, if any of you need any support. So please reach out. And you're very welcome. Thank you, everyone. And just as I said, just take care and just be gentle with yourself today. And yeah, I've drifted off to sleep. I'm in a trance, slowly coming back. Absolutely. All right, lovelies. Thank you so much. Wishing you a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. As I said, I'm here if anybody needs to reach out to me for any support. So just connect with me on WhatsApp or Facebook or via my website, miarenna.com. But have a beautiful rest of your day. And I wish you, I wish you abundance and joy. And yeah, you're very welcome. This is a wonderful, incredible study of the Akashic. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you, lovely. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.